What happens when Hollywood royalty decides she's had enough of being talked down to on national television? The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday morning as Jada Pinkett Smith settled into her chair at the view table. But nothing could have prepared the audience for the verbal demolition that was about to unfold. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts would storm off her own show, leaving behind a legacy of awkward silence and a guest who refused to back down. If you're ready to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television dynamics. The morning started like any other episode of The View. Joy Behar shuffled her notes with that familiar confidence, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose as she prepared to grill another celebrity guest. The show had built its reputation on tough questions and even tougher hosts, but Joy had always prided herself on being the sharpest knife in the drawer. She'd taken down politicians, movie stars, and business moguls with equal measure, always walking away victorious with her signature smirk intact. "Our next guest needs no introduction," Joy announced to the camera, her voice carrying that distinctive New York edge that had made her a household name. "She's an actress, producer, and recently author who has never shied away from controversial topics. Please welcome Jada Pinkett Smith." The audience erupted in applause as Jada walked onto the set, her posture radiating the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years in the spotlight. She wore a crisp white blazer that seemed to glow under the studio lights, her hair pulled back in a way that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. There was something different about her energy today, something that the seasoned hosts should have picked up on but didn't. "Jada, welcome back to The View," Joy said, extending a hand that Jada shook with a firm grip. "Thank you for having me, Joy," Jada replied, her voice steady and measured. As they settled into their chairs, the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, exchanged the usual pleasantries. The conversation began innocuously enough, touching on Jada's latest projects and her recent book tour. But Joy, true to form, was simply warming up for the main event. "So Jada," Joy began, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes, "let's talk about the elephant in the room. Your marriage has been, shall we say, unconventional. Do you think your public discussions about your personal life have been helpful or harmful to your family?" Jada's expression didn't change, but those who knew her well might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "Joy, I think honesty and transparency are always helpful, especially when you're dealing with complex human relationships. But don't you think," Joy pressed on, her voice taking on that prosecutorial tone she was famous for, "that some things should remain private? I mean, your children have had to grow up with their parents' intimate details splashed across every magazine and talk show. Isn't that a form of child abuse? I mean, one more grow up." The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something had just shifted dramatically. Whoopi cleared her throat, preparing to intervene, but Jada held up a hand that suggested she was more than capable of handling this herself. "Child abuse?" Jada repeated, her voice dropping to a lower register that somehow made it more commanding than any shout could have been. "Joy, I'm going to stop you right there. You want to talk about abuse? Let's talk about the abuse of using someone's pain as entertainment for your audience ratings." Joy's confident smirk faltered for just a moment. She'd expected pushback, but not this level of controlled intensity. "I'm simply asking the questions that our viewers want answered. Jada, that's what journalism is about." "Journalism?" Jada let out a laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a woman who's never had the courage to be vulnerable in her own life, trying to shame another woman for having that courage." The camera operators were having a field day, zooming in on both women's faces as the tension ratcheted up several notches. Joy's face was beginning to flush, a telltale sign that she was losing control of the narrative she thought she was directing. "Now wait just a minute," Joy snapped, her famous composure starting to crack. "I've been in this business for decades, and I don't need some Hollywood princess telling me what journalism is." "Hollywood princess?" Jada's eyebrows shot up, and for the first time since sitting down, she smiled. But it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that came right before someone's world got turned upside down. "Joy, let me tell you something about princesses. Real princesses don't hide behind their crown when they're scared. They face their fears head on." "What's that supposed to mean?" Joy demanded. But there was something in her voice now that suggested she really didn't want to know the answer. Jada leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking completely relaxed, despite the electric tension crackling between them. "It means that for all your tough talk and aggressive questioning, you've never once had the guts to examine your own life with the same scrutiny you demand from your guests." The words hit Joy like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. The other hosts were frozen in their chairs, unsure whether to jump in or let this verbal boxing match continue to its inevitable conclusion. The studio audience was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. "Excuse me?" Joy finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me perfectly," Jada replied, her tone remaining conversational despite the nuclear bomb she'd just dropped. "You sit here every day, hiding behind this desk, throwing stones at people who have the courage to live their lives authentically. But when was the last time you looked in the mirror and asked yourself the hard questions?" Joy's face was now completely red, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "How dare you come on my show and attack me personally? This is supposed to be about you and your choices." "Your show?" Jada laughed again, and this time, there was genuine amusement in it. "Joy, this isn't your show. This is The View. Last I checked, there were other people at this table. But that's the problem, isn't it? You think everything revolves around you and your opinions." Whoopi finally found her voice. "Ladies, perhaps we should take a step back here." "No, Whoopi," Jada said, her eyes never leaving Joy's face. "I think it's time someone said what everyone in this studio is thinking. Joy, you've built your entire career on being the mean girl at the lunch table. You think cruelty is the same thing as intelligence, and you've convinced yourself that tearing other people down somehow builds you up." "I am not cruel," Joy sputtered, her famous composure completely shattered now. "I ask tough questions. That's what separates real journalists from celebrity fluff pieces." "Real journalists?" Jada's voice rose for the first time, but it was controlled power, not wild emotion. "Real journalists do research. They ask thoughtful questions. They don't ambush their guests with accusations of child abuse because they think it'll make good television." Joy stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward with such force it nearly toppled over. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Actually, you do," Jada said, remaining perfectly seated and calm. "Because for once in your life, you're not in control of this conversation. You wanted to play hardball? Well, congratulations. You're finally playing with someone who knows how to swing the bat." The camera crew was working overtime now, capturing every micro-expression, every bead of sweat forming on Joy's forehead. The director in the booth was probably having the best day of his career, knowing they were witnessing television gold in real time. "You know what your problem is, Joy?" Jada continued, her voice taking on an almost therapeutic quality. "You're so desperate to be relevant, to be seen as this fearless truth-teller, that you've forgotten the difference between being brave and being a bully." "I am not a bully," Joy shot back, but her voice cracked on the word bully. "Really? Then explain to me how cornering someone about their family trauma on live television isn't bullying. Explain to me how asking a mother if she's abusing her children isn't bullying. Explain to me how you justify using someone's pain as entertainment for your audience." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jada held up a hand. And somehow, amazingly, Joy actually stopped talking. "I'll tell you what I think," Jada said, leaning forward slightly. "I think you're jealous. I think you're jealous of people who have the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when they're struggling, to show the world that they're human beings with real problems and real feelings." Jealous? Joy's voice was now shrill. All pretense of professional composure completely abandoned. "Of what? Of your messy marriage? Of your public humiliation?" "There it is," Jada said softly, but her words carried to every corner of the studio. "There's the real Joy Behar. The woman who thinks vulnerability is weakness. Who thinks admitting you're struggling means you've failed. That's really sad, Joy. That's a really sad way to live your life." Sarah Haynes finally found the courage to speak up. "Maybe we should go to commercial break." "No," Jada said firmly. "Joy started this conversation, and we're going to finish it. Joy, you wanted to talk about my marriage? Fine. Let's talk about it. My husband and I have been through hell and back together. We've made mistakes, we've hurt each other, we've struggled, and we've found our way back to love. That's what real relationships look like. They're messy and complicated, and beautiful and painful, all at the same time." Joy was still standing, but she was swaying slightly, as if the ground beneath her feet had become unstable. "That's not... I wasn't trying to." "You weren't trying to what? Humiliate me? Expose my failures? Make me look weak in front of millions of viewers?" Jada's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath the silk now. "Because if that's not what you were trying to do, then you're even worse at your job than I thought." The insult landed like a slap across the face. Joy's mouth fell open, and for several long seconds, she just stared at Jada, in complete shock. "How dare you question my professional competence?" Joy finally whispered. "The same way you dared to question my competence as a mother," Jada replied without missing a beat. "The difference is, I have evidence to back up my claims. Your interview style today has been sloppy. Your questions have been loaded with judgment rather than genuine curiosity. And you've allowed your personal biases to completely derail what could have been an interesting conversation." Joy was trembling now. Whether from rage or humiliation, it was impossible to tell. The other hosts were watching this verbal massacre with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You want to know what's really unprofessional?" Jada continued, seemingly oblivious to Joy's deteriorating state. "Ambushing a guest with personal attacks, disguised as journalism. Using your platform to tear down other women instead of lifting them up. Hiding behind the excuse of tough questions, when what you're really doing is feeding your audience a steady diet of cruelty and calling it entertainment." Joy's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. She looked around the studio as if searching for an escape route, but the cameras were everywhere, capturing every moment of her professional demolition. "I've been doing this show for over 20 years, Joy said, her voice barely audible now. "And in all that time," Jada replied, her tone almost gentle now, which somehow made her words even more devastating. "Have you ever once stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's a better way? Have you ever thought that you could use your influence to heal instead of harm?" "That's not... I don't," Joy stammered, all of her famous quick wit completely deserting her. "You don't what, Joy? You don't care about the damage you do? You don't think about the real people behind the headlines you dissect for sport? You don't consider that the celebrities you mock and criticize are human beings with feelings and families?" Whoopi made another attempt to regain control. "Jada, I think we need to." "No, Whoopi, let her answer," Jada said, her gaze never wavering from Joy's face. "I'm genuinely curious. Joy, when you go home at night, when you're alone with your thoughts, do you ever feel proud of the way you've treated people? Do you ever feel good about making someone cry on national television? Joy's hands were shaking visibly now. She tried to speak several times, but only managed to produce strangled sounds that weren't quite words. "Because I'll tell you what I see when I look at you right now," Jada continued, her voice taking on an almost clinical quality. "I see a woman who's so afraid of her own vulnerability that she's spent decades attacking vulnerability in others. I see someone who's convinced herself that being mean is the same thing as being strong. And honestly, it makes me feel sorry for you." The word sorry hung in the air like a death sentence. Joy's face crumpled, as if she'd been physically struck. The pity in Jada's voice was somehow more devastating than all the anger and accusations that had come before. "Don't you dare," Joy whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Don't you dare feel sorry for me." "Why not?" Jada asked. And for the first time, there was genuine compassion in her voice. "Joy, what happened to you that made you think the only way to feel powerful was to make other people feel powerless? What hurt you so badly that you decided kindness was weakness?" The question was asked so gently, with such genuine curiosity and concern, that it was like watching someone defuse a bomb by cutting the wrong wire. Joy's entire defensive structure simply collapsed. "I can't," Joy said, backing away from the table. "I can't do this anymore." "You can't do what anymore, Joy?" Jada pressed, but her tone remained soft. "You can't answer honest questions about your own behavior? You can't face the same kind of scrutiny you dish out to everyone else? Or you can't keep pretending that cruelty is just part of the job?" Joy was openly crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks in dark rivers. The studio was so quiet that you could hear the sound of her ragged breathing through the microphones. "This isn't fair," Joy sobbed. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." "Joy. How was it supposed to go, Joy?" Jada asked, rising from her chair for the first time since the confrontation began. "Were you supposed to tear me apart while I sat here quietly and took it? Were you supposed to humiliate me and then send me on my way with a fake smile and a thanks for coming on the show?" Joy wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup even further. I was just doing my job." "No, Joy. You were doing what you've always done. You were using your platform to hurt someone because it makes you feel better about yourself. But here's the thing you never considered. What happens when your victim decides to fight back?" The cameras captured every moment as Joy looked around the table at her co-hosts, searching their faces for support that wasn't coming. Whoopi looked concerned but not sympathetic. Sarah and Alyssa were staring at their hands, unable to meet Joy's desperate gaze. "I need to leave," Joy said suddenly, her voice thick with tears and humiliation. "You don't have to leave, Joy," Jada said, and the kindness in her voice was almost harder to watch than the earlier aggression. "You just need to apologize. Please. Win the ride. Sent her. Please problems on ride." "Apologize?" Joy's voice cracked on the word. "For the ambush. For the personal attacks. For using my family's pain as entertainment. For spending years building a career on other people's suffering. Just say you're sorry, Joy. It's not that hard." Joy stood there for what felt like an eternity, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. The studio was so silent, you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was waiting to see if she would find the courage to take responsibility for her actions. Instead, Joy ripped off her microphone with such force that the wire snapped. She threw it down on the table where it landed with a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. "I quit," she said, her voice barely recognizable through the tears and rage. "I quit this show. I quit this network. I quit all of it." Without another word, Joy Behar stormed off the set, leaving behind a trail of stunned silence and a guest who had just accomplished something that seemed impossible. She had rendered one of television's most notorious loudmouths completely speechless. As the cameras continued to roll, Jada calmly returned to her seat and looked directly into the camera with a slight smile. "And that," she said to the millions of viewers watching at home, "is what happens when you confuse courage with cruelty." The confrontation that shook daytime television to its core shows us that sometimes the most powerful response to aggression isn't more aggression, but simply refusing to be a victim. What did you think of Jada's handling of Joy's attack? Was she too harsh? Or was it exactly what Joy needed to hear? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction.